G'day, welcome to Neurological. How you going, everyone? Today I'm going to talk to you about a video done by another much larger YouTuber called Iilluminaughtii. She's one of my favourite YouTubers and I've left a link to her channel below because I strongly recommend her stuff. Please go check her out. She's great. I also want to remind you not to send her any hate or vitriol towards her. She just made a mistake and let's just keep that in mind. If you do go see her stuff, please press the like button, the subscribe button, ring the bell, etc. And let her know that I've sent you. Also, don't forget to do the same thing for me. If you don't know who she is, her channel is aimed at dodgy companies, especially MLMs or multi-level marketing schemes. She's done deep dives into companies like Nestle, Huawei, SeaWorld and DC Solar. Some of the MLMs she's gone after include Mary Kay, Arbonne, Avon and Nexium, which is an MLM that is on a whole nother level of disturbing. She also goes after charities including PETA, Salvation Army and Autism Speaks. So you could say her expertise is in investigating companies. And from what I can see, she's actually really quite good at what she does. Occasionally she does branch out and does videos on true crime or haunted places, and even talks about some scientific things. And while I don't have any problems with her investigation of companies, true crimes or stories about haunted areas, scientific topics is where she tends to drop the ball. You see, researching a company is a very different kettle of fish compared to researching scientific topics. For example, if I wanted to research a company, I would do what she does. Go to Wikipedia. While Wikipedia is not the best place to draw information from directly, it does give a good starting point because claims made in the article are usually cited, and those without citations are often marked as such. From there, you can go to the original sources to get a clearer picture. Also, when researching a company, ex-employees of particularly bad ones will go online to talk about their experiences, so you can go to Reddit, YouTube, and other social media for primary sources. These are all very good research methods when it comes to investigating companies. However, if you want to research something in science, the first thing you could do is go to Wikipedia for the same reasons I said before. It's a good springboard into linking you to sources. If it linked you to a media report rather than the study, you have to go to the primary source rather than relying on the media because they are notorious for misrepresenting the science. Often, media even overstates the results to sell products when commissioned to do so. Nutrition is unfortunately a perfect example of that. Once you get to the primary source, you should look at the journal the study was published in. Have a look at the name or age of the journal to give you an idea of how reliable it is. I mean, would you trust a study on how depressed atheists are if it was published in the Journey of Psychology and Christianity? I wouldn't. After that, you look up the impact factor of the journal, among other things. I did a whole video on how to pick a good scientific journal here. Or if the iCard doesn't work, it's in the description below. After doing all of that, even before you even look at the paper, you need to go onto other websites to see what other scientists think of the study. Look it up on retractionwatch.com to see if the study was retracted, and if so, why. Then you finally read the study and you look out for problems in the statistical analysis, such as p-hacking and a low n value. Also, you need to look at how many times that study was cited. The more citations, the more likely it is to be accurate. So I'm pretty sure you can see the differences in researching scientific papers and companies are. The problem is that Blair, or the Iilluminaughtii, seems to research science in the same way she researches companies. And that's not good, because she did a video on BIID, or Body Integrity Identity Disorder. And frankly, she did a terrible job. She did preface the video stating that we should approach the topic with some caution. She said, "Don't hate on people for things they cannot control," and I am totally down with that. But as you will see, her video is extremely damaging to people who have BIID. She defines the topic as
Transableism refers to the desire of one to become physically disabled.
In my opinion, this definition is extremely oversimplified to the point of being incorrect. And she stops there. Not once does she mention that people who have BIID do not consider part of their body as belonging to them. They describe the offending limbs as alien or not mine or even parasitic. Having this condition is like having a stranger's leg attached to you. It's extremely distressing and people have killed themselves trying to do at-home amputations. It is a serious disorder. By the way she presents and defines it, it would be very reasonable to question why would we enable people cutting off their own limbs. She goes on to say that she wants to try and stay unbiased in this video, and personally I don't think she did a very good job at that. She continually mentions the words mental illness throughout the video before even including verbally naming the disorder BIID. Personally, I believe using this term in a way diminishes it because mental illness is such a nebulous term. It can describe anything from anxiety to depression to schizophrenia to OCD. I'm not dismissing the pain sufferers of these disorders undergo. I'm just making the observation that mental illness is so broad that it loses almost all meaning when it comes to defining any disorder, especially one that not many people know about. If she had said a mental illness that may have links to OCD, people might start to understand how serious it is. She defines BIID without explaining how it impacts a person's life or any potential causes of the disorder beyond mental illness, and then she referenced an opinion piece by a pissed off amputee who, from what I can see, has no training in mental health. Poisoning the well much? The first example of her not understanding how to do scientific research is that she uses the NCBI. Now, when I started my degree, I thought the NCBI was an actual journal, and in some of my older videos, I referenced it as if it was one. So, to be honest, I can't exactly criticize her for this. But the problem with the NCBI is that it's not a journal, it's a database. It contains studies and journals that just aren't great. Just like IMDb will feature excellent movies from Inception and Lord of the Rings to movies like Sharknado or Poltergeist, Night of the Chicken Dead. Apparently that's a movie, which I kind of want to watch now. In the NCBI, you can find the journal Evidence-Based Complementary and Alternative Medicine. If you haven't watched my How to Pick a Good Scientific Journal video, I mentioned that the longer or more complex a journal's name is, the more likely it is to be younger and therefore more likely to be unreliable because they haven't passed the test of time. That's not to say that they are unreliable, but that's just something to look out for. There's a reason why journals with such simple names such as Nature and The Lancet have such high impact factors, which is a measure of a journal's reliability. It's because they're old. I looked at the Evidence-Based Complementary and Alternative Medicine Journal. It was established in 2013 and has an impact factor of 1.79. For a journal that concentrates on a fairly broad subject, i.e. complementary and alternative medicine, that's a very low impact factor, especially since it has been steadily declining since it was founded. And this journal was found in the NCBI. Blair cited a study from PLOS1 which has a low impact factor of 2.8. I'm calling this low because it's a general science journal where any branch of science can be published in it. The broader the range of subjects, the more likely it is to be cited and the higher its impact factor is. However, its sister journals such as PLOS Biology is 7.6, which is quite high for a more niche journal. So I'm not entirely sure what to make of that, to be honest. Before I go on to talk about the study in PLOS1, I want to loop back into the video done by Blair. She quotes the PLOS1 study.
Body Integrity Identity Disorder, BIID, is a rare, infrequently studied, and highly secretive condition in which there is a mismatch between the mental body image and the physical body. Subjects suffering from BIID have an intense desire to amputate a major limb or sever the spinal cord in order to become paralyzed. See that? Infrequently studied.
And as you can see, she highlights the fact it is infrequently studied, which it is. However, she doesn't continue with the important information that is found only a few paragraphs down in the article, which would have made this video significantly better. Based on the subject's reports, we found that BIID had an onset in early childhood. The main rationale given for their desire for body modification is to feel complete or to feel satisfied inside. Somatic and severe psychiatric comorbidity is unusual, but depressive symptoms and mood disorders can be present, possibly secondary to the enormous distress BIID puts upon a person. Amputation and paralyzation variant do not differ in any clinical variable. Surgery is found helpful in all subjects who underwent amputation, and those subjects score significantly lower on a disability scale than BIID subjects without body modification. I want to make it very clear here that often therapy and medication doesn't work as treatments for BIID, but removal of the limb is usually the only way to treat this disorder. Also, I'm going to draw attention to that last point. Surgery is found helpful in all subjects who underwent amputation, and those subjects score significantly lower on a disability scale than BIID subjects without body modification. People with BIID who had undergone amputation gain functionality. They become less disabled after amputation. Keep that in the back of your mind because it does come up later. Remember how she kept saying BIID was a mental illness? Here, in the paper that she herself cited, suggests that BIID may not be one, but instead something else, as somatic and severe psychiatric comorbidity is unusual. By the way, from what I understand, a somatic comorbidity occurs when a physical disorder is caused by a psychiatric disorder, just like diarrhea can be caused by anxiety. In an article I found in an ethics journal, Body Integrity Identity Disorder is the amputation of healthy limbs ethically justified, it talks about BIID, of course. However, it is an opinion in an ethics journal, so I don't exactly know how to approach this. On the other hand, it has a lot of references to more research. And from what I can tell, the person talking about it has some experience in mental health. At the end of the paragraph explaining the amputation desire, the author says psychologists, psychiatrists, and neurologists offer quite different explanations for the amputation desire. They discuss whether it is a neurotic disorder, an obsessive-compulsive disorder, an identity disorder like transsexuality, or a neurological conflict between a person's anatomy and body image, which could stem from damage to part of the brain that constructs the body image in map-like form. I just want to make it very clear that scientists don't definitively know what causes BIID and could be in fact be a combination of many things. I just want to bring your attention to the last part of that paragraph. A neurological conflict between a person's anatomy and body image, which could stem from damage to part of the brain that constructs the body image in map-like form. What does this mean? Your brain has a map of your body. It knows your body has a right foot or a left pinky or two knees. However, sometimes the map your brain has of your body doesn't correlate with your physical body. This is why people who have BIID are often equated to people who are trans. Trans people who want to transition to their correct gender identity sometimes, but not always, report that their genitalia is alien to them. And of course, if a trans person doesn't want to transition, they are still a trans person. For those who do find their sex presentation to be dysphoric, no matter how hard they try, they cannot match their perceived gender with their physical sex. Not without hormonal treatment for most, if not surgery. It is now accepted within the psychiatric community that trans people do not have a mental illness. One hypothesis as to why trans people have gender dysphoria is because the map of their body within their brain does not correlate with their physical body, among a myriad of other reasons. The map the brain has of a person's body is one of the reasons why amputees get phantom pain. There are reports of people who have suffered from strokes or tumours in the parietal lobe that suffer from BIID. I've left a link below that explains what the parietal lobe does, but basically it's the part of the brain that interprets sensory input. People who develop BIID after damage to the parietal lobe develop a condition known as Potzel syndrome. I probably destroyed that name, by the way. Other examples of BIID occur after an injury to the offending limb. The hypothesis is that this injury may include interruption of communication between the brain and the limb. This may also occur congenitally, aka when developing within the womb. In fact, many BIID sufferers report that they knew their offending limb was not part of their bodies from an early age. There are some other hypotheses as to the origin of this disorder, such as sexual fetishization of amputees. In the ethics article I referenced, this theory is supported by findings of psychiatrist Michael First of Columbia University from 2004, who reports that 87% of 52 people with BIID felt sexually drawn to amputees, and nearly one-third had at least one further paraphilia, but sexual urges do not fully explain the disorder. Also, a study of 52 people is nowhere near enough for a comprehensive study. The abstract of the study, which investigated paraphilia and BIID, the researcher mentioned the most common reported reason for wanting an amputation was the subject's feeling that it would correct a mismatch between the person's anatomy and sense of his or her true self, brackets, identity. None were delusional. For all but one subject, age at onset was during childhood or early adolescence. For those who had psychotherapy or medication, there was no change in the intensity of the desire for amputation. The 6 subjects who had an amputation at their desired site reported that following the amputation, they felt better than they ever had and no longer had a desire for an amputation. There's another hypothesis that a person desiring an amputation is doing it for attention, which is one of my biggest criticisms of Blair's video. Let's recap. She calls people who are transabled or basically BIID sufferers mentally ill. The jury is still out on that one, but I hope I've made it clear that the leading hypothesis is that it is a neurological disorder, aka a physical problem with the brain, not a mental illness. This is a problem in her video because not once did she mention alternative explanation of the disorder, except for one. I'll come back to that. She then barely describes the disorder and does not explain how it can impact the person suffering from it. Again, people have died trying to amputate their limbs. It can cause extreme distress and discomfort for the person. It can cause people to become depressed and withdrawn. In the person's mind, they are literally carrying around someone else's body part or some sort of parasite. They feel overcomplete and not in a good way. They just want it gone. This is not a, oh, I kind of don't want my arm today thing. It's actually really quite serious. After failing to describe the disorder at all and how it impacts on people suffering from it, she then goes on to cite an article by an amputee named Andrea Ruth and how transableism affects them, a person who is an amputee, not a person who has BIID. Blair's video is titled The Truth About BIID, but she's quoting an opinion piece written by an amputee, not a person who has BIID, which, in my opinion, ends up being quite hypocritical further on into the video. To make it worse, this article was also published in The Federalist, and this is a big issue for me. And here's why. According to Media Bias Fact Check, The Federalist comes under right bias and is a questionable source. While the following quote is a generic disclaimer by Media Bias, it definitely describes the Federalist very closely. These media sources are moderately to strongly biased towards conservative causes through story selection and / or political affiliation. They may utilize strong loaded words, wording that attempts to influence an audience by using appeal to emotional stereotypes, publish misleading reports, and omit reporting of information that may damage conservative causes. Some sources in this category may be untrustworthy. I have never read an article from the Federalist that didn't have extremely loaded language. Going back to Media Bias Fact Check, it describes the Federalist as a news and opinion website that reports with a right-wing bias that typically favours the right and denigrates the left. There is frequent use of loaded emotional language. And that's true. They like using appeal to emotion like it's going out of fashion. The article that is written by Andrea Ruth, the amputee, is no different. The opening paragraph of her opinion piece is this. Last week in Vanity Fair, Bruce Jenner unveiled himself as Caitlyn. Not many hours after, the next new thing came along, Transableism. I'm glad autocorrect doesn't recognize that word at this point. Give it a few months. Transableism is defined as someone who desires to become physically disabled. They ostensibly believe they are meant to be that way, much in the same way that someone like Jenner believes he was meant to be a woman. Yes, you just heard that correctly. She deliberately misgendered Caitlyn Jenner twice, downplays the pain a trans person goes through to become their true identity, and makes a dig at the woke left in 5 fucking sentences. I could probably do an entire video on this article because this woman has literally no idea what she is talking about. She is just angry and wants to rant. Fair enough, I can't shame her for that. However, I can call her out on her misinformed and malignant attitudes towards people who have BIID. In the article here, she says, you do not have a right to impose your illness on society. There is a basic concept familiar to anyone who goes through political science or philosophy 101 known as the harm principle. The gist is that society shouldn't stop you from doing what you please unless it harms others. While one could argue that the transabled aren't harming anyone but themselves, the very act of deliberately imposing themselves on society is in fact the harm. People with BIID, after getting the offending limb removed, often become more productive members of society, as I mentioned earlier. Remember the study where they say a person scores lower on the disability index after receiving an amputation? Andrea Ruth also writes, being disabled is expensive and difficult to do on your own. Even when you can function independently, it still takes incredible amounts of time and paperwork to tell the federal and state governments to please go away. In my case, a rather frustratingly hilarious go-around with Social Security disability ensued. That sounds like a problem with your social security rather than those people who have a disability. In Australia, due to our National Disability Insurance Scheme, people who have disabilities have a much easier time accessing government funding. Another of many problems I have with the Federalist article is that Andrea Ruth complains about BIID sufferers as if their desire to have their limb removed is a personal insult to her. And I understand that BIID may be offensive to amputees, and I'm not taking that pain away from them. I'd be pissed off too if someone wanted to become disabled and I was an amputee. However, I come to the same conclusion with BIID as I do with trans people. If somebody wants to modify their body to make themselves happier, then what right do I have to stop them? If someone requires an amputation to be happier, then go for it. It's not like my life is going to be impacted at all. My personal taxes may make up a fraction of a cent towards their improved livelihood, and I can handle that. And what makes it even funnier, that the author of this article is libertarian. I thought they were all about personal freedom. For a more compassionate response to BIID from a person who is an amputee, please check out Footless Joe's video on it here. Or again, if the iCard doesn't work, in the description below. The Iilluminaughtii's video continues.
I believe that acting on one's desire to be physically disabled is directly disrespectful to those who have been disabled by events outside their control.
I couldn't disagree more. Again, if BIID is rooted in a neurological disorder, which seems to be the soft consensus among researchers of this disorder, then they are no different to a trans woman wanting to transition. Is that insulting to women? Some would say yes, but those people are also known as TERFs, and their opinions on this are garbage. The "but it's expensive" argument also pops up several times in Blair's video. This disorder is extremely rare, so rare that I couldn't find the prevalence in the community. It would not be a common surgery, therefore it would not be at all burdensome on the taxpayer. Not only that, if a person wants only an arm or a leg removed, they may not need any long-term support outside of a prosthesis. Yes, some people want to be paralysed or blinded, which is a different thing, but I can tell you this. People with only one arm can live quite well without the need for a support worker. Not all people with BIID want to end up a quadruple amputee. Okay, right now I'm 7 minutes into the Iilluminaughtii's 30-minute video, and she starts referring to something that I think she focuses way too much on. And that is the wish to become disabled for attention-seeking reasons. In fact, she spends significantly more time talking about this reason for BIID than over any other potential cause of this disorder. Remember how I said she never once mentioned it could be a neurological disorder? Well, that's possibly because she concentrates on the attention-seeking people. In my research, attention-seeking behaviour around BIID is only really touched upon. One researcher, Richard L. Bruno, in 1997, floated the idea that people that had childhoods that lacked love and attention became jealous of people who were disabled. I am not a psychologist nor trained in this area of research, and I have definitely not read all of the papers on it. However, if that is the case, there would be a much higher prevalence of people with BIID. A lot of people grew up in neglectful households. In the ethics article I mentioned earlier, the author says, according to Bruno, apoptemnophilia is a factitious disorder, i.e. a psychological disease in which a disability is seen as a way to gain attention that was lacked in childhood. In my opinion, the psychological explanations of the desire for amputation are not convincing because it is too specific, too irrational, and less capable of being influenced to be explained alone by a lack of love in childhood. Again, I'm not trained in psychology, but I tend to agree. It doesn't make sense in light of other suggested causes. However, Blair continues over and over and over again to highlight this hypothesis in her video, and out of all of the ones I've read, this is the one that I personally believe to be the least likely explanation. Do these people exist? Yeah, of course. There's weird people out there. But I genuinely think they have been amplified by people who don't understand what BIID is, which would be everyone, because nobody knows what BIID is. Blair then goes on a tangent to start talking about the fetishization of mental illness in the media. I'm not going to comment on that because it is completely off topic, which is another problem I have with this video. At least half of it was focused on things that had nothing to do with BIID. A huge chunk of it was talking about disability representation in the media. What the hell does that have to do with a disorder that makes people want to amputate their limbs? Nothing. She talks about how people with a disability are often played by able-bodied people in TV and shows and movies, which I think is kind of shit myself, and it definitely bothers me too. An article she references in the video is written by a person who has a disability. They mention that when able-bodied people play characters with a disability, they cannot accurately portray what it's like for a person with that particular disability. The people they are supposed to portray are not consulted, and their experiences are diluted. And here I believe is where some hypocrisy comes in. Blair writes a script about BIID. She takes opinions from amputees, not people suffering from BIID, one of which is from The Federalist. She doesn't talk about how detrimental BIID is for sufferers. She doesn't adequately explain what this disorder entails. She doesn't talk about the very real emotional pain they go through. She doesn't talk about how it impacts on their lives. She only talks about two potential causes, either mental illness and people who just do it for the attention. She ignores significant research going into BIID, which seems to be pointing to a neurological disorder. In that case, this video makes me wonder, did she contact a person with BIID and ask them to tell their story? Did she watch videos about it on YouTube from people who have it? I would hazard a guess no, because I don't think she'd have written a script like that if she had. She talked about proper representation of people who have a disability in media, but I don't think she did the basic research required to properly represent a group of people who may or may not have a neurological disorder. She makes out that BIID is a decision taken lightly for no reason other than, I want to. And it is far, far more than that. And in a video that is just over 30 minutes long, at the 27-minute mark, she starts to talk about the real suffering people with BIID undergo. 27 minutes in. I probably don't need to tell you that at the end of a video, you have less people watching it. Any information that you are going to put at the end of a video is going to be seen by significantly less people. And that is problematic. She spent almost half an hour misrepresenting a serious issue, going on tangents about fetishization of mental illness, which is a problem, a lack of representation of people with a disability in media, which has nothing to do with BIID, only to swing around and talk about the issues of a BIID from a more sympathetic viewpoint. And even then she doesn't do a good job. She spends at least 10 minutes at the beginning of the video talking about an issue from the perspective of someone who doesn't have that issue and is hostile towards people who have BIID. And right at the end of the video, for 1 minute and 15 seconds, she reads an excerpt from a magazine that describes it better. And they didn't even do a very good job. Again, her video is titled The Truth About BIID, and frankly, there's not a lot of truth about it at all in this video. I left a comment saying how disappointed I was in her. I felt I needed to bring it to her attention because this video was so damaging to the people who had this disorder. She's a big YouTuber and her video is filled with so many inaccuracies and misrepresentations. She tackled a complex and relatively unknown disorder in a way that perpetuates discrimination against people who have it. This video is made significantly worse by the size of her platform. People who have never heard of BIID will come away from it with prejudices against sufferers. One perfect example is I sent her video to a friend of mine. They said that they watched about a minute of it and sent me a message saying, Transableism? Jesus, I'm really not interested in an understanding view of Transableism. Luckily, this person is open-minded and I was able to explain what BIID is and they ended up going, fucking do a video on this. The fact that this happened is a microcosm of the potential harm of this video, and it is harmful. I hope that the damage she has done will not spread too far and she will address these issues at a later date. In order to help mitigate some of the damage, I screenshotted my comment I put on her video and sent it to her via DMs on Twitter. As a YouTuber, I understand how vitriolic some people can be if they disagree with you. So I said something along the lines of, hey, I think you're great, love your work, but I have some major issues with your latest video. Here's a screenshot of the comment I left. It wasn't bad or rude or anything, it was basically this video in a comment. I don't know if that was an asshole move. It probably was, but in my opinion, her video had some major flaws that I thought she should know about and correct. Full disclosure here, I decided to do this video as soon as I watched hers because it really upset me, not because of what happened next. Also, I don't have BIID, just in case you're wondering. So while researching this video, I thought I should double check what pronouns Blair uses, so I popped onto Twitter and saw this. Yeah, she blocked me. No response to my DM or anything like that. Just a block. To be honest, that's really disappointing for me. I won't continue watching her stuff anymore, but personally I still think you should because she's an excellent YouTuber. But if she wasn't willing to listen to valid criticisms, in my opinion, she's not worth watching. I left a link to my screenshot of my comment below if you are curious to see it. And I still don't know what her preferred pronouns are. Anyway, I hope that helps clear up some of the issues that I had with her video and gives you a lot more information about this disorder. The final thing I want to say is that she's right on one major point about BIID. There's not enough research being done on this disorder, and hopefully in the future we can find a treatment that doesn't include removing limbs. Anyway, I hope you have a lovely day, evening, night, whatever, and scandium, iodine, nitrogen, and cerium. I just want to say a very special thank you to my wonderful patrons, especially my $10 Platypus patrons, Aided Verbal, Lauren Hart, Amanda Vogue, and Ross Devereux. I also want to say a very special thank you to my $20 Platypus patrons, Ethan Stroop and Paul Butler. Again, a quick reminder, please don't go and send any hate her way. Just make sure that you approach this subject with love and care towards her. Because I understand she made a mistake, and we're all human, we do that. Don't forget, if you do go and comment on her, press the subscribe button, press the like button, and let her know that I sent you.